There are many discussions that seem to keep reoccurring in the Transformer world. A lot of these discussions turn into debates, maybe even arguments, and a lot of people like to discuss which character is better, which one is more powerful, which one is more popular and more loved. When it comes to Optimus Prime, pretty much he wins versus everyone, it seems like. Optimus Prime versus Hot Rod and Rodimus, obviously he wins, even though there's a lot of Rodimus fans out there and Hot Rod fans out there. You have to admit, Optimus Prime always wins. But when it comes to Megatron versus Galvatron, that gap is a lot more narrow. Yes, today I'm going to talk about which one of these characters is more loved by the masterpiece and third-party Transformer companies. We're going to talk about this coming up.
Well, they were the same guy.
So I'm going to start off by running through quickly the Megatron figures made, the Galvatron figures made. Then we're going to get into talking about the media exposure for each one of them. And then I'm going to give you some possible future outlook for these characters and what could be happening and coming up in the future. So let's get right in with Megatron. So in the beginning we had MPO5. He was kind of a spindly kind of guy. I guess you could say a spindly mess. He definitely was rushed. It wasn't a finished product when it went out, and yet they still made it. He looks kind of like Megatron. He actually fits the bill, and when he was released, people were paying excessive amounts of money for him. I think he was released at $200 in, what was it, 05, 06, something like that when he came out. So that's crazy for back then, but he was 12 inches. In the original line of 12-inch figures, he was a good size figure. Now, if you want a 12-inch figure, and you don't like this one, you could go after the Wei Zhang 12-inch one. Yes, Wei Zhang, the KO company, made their own design of a 12-inch figure, and he looks pretty good. Now, I never got my hands on it, but everyone says that he is a pretty solid figure, aside from, like, the knees kind of go outward or something. But here, this is the picture. You see for yourself. So now the first third-party company to actually make a Megatron of substance here was Toy World's Hegemon. That one caused a lot of ripples. A lot of people liked that one and were picking it up. This was a $110 figure according to TF Source at the time. I remember it costing around $100, and I really didn't like the idea of spending that much money on a chug figure. Yes, this was 7 inches tall, so it wasn't even Masterpiece, and I start to wonder how many people put this thing on their Masterpiece shelf as kind of a filler until they got a real Masterpiece one. So X-Transbots was the first Masterpiece 9-inch, the new smaller 9-inch scale to make theirs, and their Apollyon was a pretty good looking Megatron. So looking at him, you could tell he was Megatron. You could tell that on your shelf you had a leader of the Decepticons, and this was the first third-party figure I actually pre-ordered, and I was kind of wanting to stay away from third-party because I figured, what if I spent $150 on this guy and then down the road he's only worth like $40? I would feel kind of bad that I did that. So good thing it didn't happen. Wait, or did it? So anyway, this guy does look good, and he worked. But then a year later, we got some other options. So we got the Dx9 Mitron and the Make Toys Despotron. And it seemed like these two came out within months of each other. It was kind of odd how it happened. But if anyone was like me, and they already spent $150 on Apollyon, then looking at both of these options, you just kind of picked whatever looked bad on them or the worst aspect of them, and that was the reason you weren't interested in them, because you wanted to protect your initial investment. You didn't want to spend more money on it. That's how I was. But I do have to say, both of these figures had something going for them. I think the DX9 option does look really clean and feels pretty solid, and the Make Toys is really menacing, really mean looking, and I hear he is so solid that you can run him over with your car and it won't knock him over. Then we got Takara's MP36 in around 2017. Now this Megatron is a game changer. Now there was a couple of things that it changed the game on. First off, it had an excellent looking sculpt, looked extremely tune accurate, just a very good looking butt. Extended the leg, so it was a longer leg, shorter torso, amazing amount of posability and articulation in this figure. Extremely complex transformation to have a good looking mode, both modes looking good. But with it came a new price point. This was the highest priced Transformer in the Masterpiece line that I had ever seen, at $250. So for that price, that was just way too much for me. I passed on it, and I waited for the KO. Right out of the gate, you got the KO that was a 1-to-1 exact replica with the exact same box that was slightly different. You can tell the difference between them. And it did have the Decepticon symbol on his chest. Now, I actually think the KOs just copied the artwork too. Why not copy it? So the pictures that you got of most of the KOs were just the picture of the official product. And when you got the figure, you didn't know if it was really going to match. Now, I got every one of these KOs for the most part. And this one was fine. If it's the only one they ever made, I would have been happy with it. But it was a bit floppy. It felt like it wasn't stiff. It didn't have tight joints. The problems with that figure weren't so much that it was a bad figure or a bad version. It was just that it felt like it needed to be a little bit tighter. Tolerance is a little bit tighter, and it would have been a better figure. It was a little bit floppy, and a shake test could rattle that thing apart. So we then got the Infinite Transformation and the Toy House Factory. Toy House Factory on the left, Infinite Transformations on the right. And so the original one, KO, was about $100. These guys were around $100. Maybe, I think these were like $5 more, maybe like $105. Now these had a lot more options with them. First of all, the one on the left, the Toy House Factory, had the toy head. Like, you could make it look like it was the toy Megatron. Showed it some love there. You got some Megatron love with that figure. It also had an upgraded cannon with English voice clips, and the Toy House Factory, in my opinion, was the best of these options at the time, because he did have American voice clips that sounded very clear. They weren't Frank Welker, but they were good. You also got the squiggly lines on the chest, but you, with both of these options, you did not get the Decepticon symbol printed on the chest. Moving over to Infinite Transformations, it had a few really cool options on it. It had some sort of a coating where it wouldn't scratch the paint. He also had some English voice clips, but it was allegedly Frank Welker's voice, but it was really bad quality. The quality of sound was terrible on that one, but look at the love that we're getting with Megatron. Then we got a premium version, a Mag 10 version. That was like $125, maybe $130. And this one had a lot of different coloring to the plastic parts, but the silver parts were a really shiny, reflective color. I really enjoyed the very metallic look of this thing. I finally got one, and I didn't have to pay the $130, but I got a used one, and I like it. My issue with it is mine's used, been flipped back and forth a couple times, and once you transform this thing, he does loosen up a bit. So I really can't speak to how well it is when it's brand new, but I would think the Mag 10 is the best of all of these if you get a new one that's stiff and all the joints are good. Then we got like another company trying to make a 1-to-1 exact replica. Daban model. I don't know anything about that. I never got my hands on this figure. By the time this came out, I was like, why? Why bother? What's the point? We've already got all these other companies making it. But hey, this might be a prelude to what's going to happen with the MP44 mold. If that's true, then we're going to get a gold one, a cel-shaded one, and a clear one. That all happened with Megatron MP36. But I do want to point out that once Takara puts out a figure, third party just stops making that character. It just seems like that's it. Now, I don't know why. I'm assuming it's one of two things. Either they don't think that they could beat Takara. Takara is the best around. They can't beat Takara. That's one. Or Takara says, we let you exist, and we are going to leave you alone if you don't make this character. But if you make this character after we put it out or while we're working on it, then we're going to have a problem. It could be from respect, but it could be they're just afraid to waste their time and money and effort if Takara is just going to blow them out of the water. Next, let's look at some of the Galvatron love here. We've got the Dx9 Tyrant. Now, for whatever reason, I always thought that this one was like a chug scale, but this is the Dx9 Legends scale version, the War in Pocket series. And I never messed with this one particularly, but this one is really small. But what really confuses me, and probably confused other people, is that they used the term Dx9 Tyrant for a smaller one, and then they made a bigger Masterpiece version. And it was pretty good. But they also named it Tyrant, so it's strange that there are a lot of Dx9 Tyrants floating around out there. So looking at their Masterpiece version, he was the 9-inch scale, and his feet looked a little bit funny. This picture does hide it a bit, but they look like kind of half-moon ovals, and that was one of the bigger problems. Now, it didn't bother me when I had this figure because of the fact that I didn't see the feet the way I display them, so that wasn't a problem. Now, his shoulder pads, the shoulder pieces there, they move when you move his arms. So if you were to set him up and display him and then move his little shoulder pieces the way you want them, then he's not an issue. But that was actually an issue with the figure. And the kind of spindly fingers, again, are not a problem for me. If you pose it and leave it on your shelf, he can hold his pose and he can look pretty good. So at the time, this guy was my Galvatron for a while, and I liked him. I think he was great. So then Fantoys came out with their FT16 and their Sovereign. They also made the M version, which is a movie version. And so between the two of these, they both look great. And I actually can't decide which one I like better because I really like purple. But the thing is that this figure is solid and fixes a lot of things that the DX9 had issues with. But on the flip side, I do feel like this one's a little bit stocky. But I think a lot of collectors like that stocky, beefy, menacing look that it portrays. Fans Toys put this figure out, did a great job with him. He's highly sought after. He's very solid, really solid figure. But then people kind of argue that Dx9 Tyrant has a better alt mode. I'll leave that up to everybody else. Then Open and Play came out with their option, so a super duper budget option. I think it was originally $60 or $70. I got mine for like $35. And I have to admit that I didn't even notice that it was just a KO oversized version of the Titan Returns one. And then they made his head a real head, not the Titan Returns one. And this guy still looks okay. I think Hasbro did a good job with their design. But it's not quite Masterpiece. It doesn't feel Masterpiece. It's really light. But if you need a budget option and you are not looking to spend $250, $300 on the Fans Toys one or whatever you can get a DX9 one for these days, then this might be an option for you. But I figured I'd throw it in there. Now, X-Transbots had plans for their Abaddon, but they abandoned the Abaddon. And a lot of people felt like this would have been the best one out of all of them. Now, we kind of see X-Transbots and Fans Toys going head-to-head and toe-to-toe with some of the other characters, and they would have done that with this figure here. In fact, there are multiple different designs that they have revealed about this Abaddon, and this one here looks pretty good too. So they are working on it. They had taken this character serious, and there's no telling why they canceled it. For all we know, they might still be working on it. But here's another early version of their figure. And I think they went back to the drawing board because the other ones, I think, look better than this. But if anybody can go toe-to-toe with Fans Toys, that is X-Transbots. And we've already seen it happen today. I really think Fans Toys went back to the drawing board for Trailbreaker and redesigned their Trailbreaker because X-Transbots did such a good job with theirs. That's my personal opinion. And it might be a little bit more than just the Trailbreaker because X-Transbots Hoist is great, and I'm sure Fans Toys will use some of the engineering for a hoist down the road, or maybe they won't, who knows. But they go head-to-head, and I think they could have done it with Galvatron. I wish they wouldn't have given up. So next up we want to talk about Megatron versus Galvatron in the media, and I'm really just going to focus on the US cartoon continuity, and that's it. So if you want to see which one got more love in the US cartoon, you're going to look at Megatron. Now Megatron got Season 1, Season 2, and 1/3 of the movie. Galvatron got 2/3 of the movie, Season 3, and Season 4. So looking at it like this, that looks like an even 50-50 split. Half the media for Megatron, half the media for Galvatron. It's a tie right there in the media, but not really. When you really back up and look at it, it is a much different picture. Megatron was in a total of 65 episodes between Season 1 and Season 2, and if you add one episode for 1/3 of the movie, That is 66 episodes. And looking at Galvatron, on the other hand, Galvatron was in 33 episodes. Add 2 episodes for 2/3 of the movie, and it puts him in at 35 episodes. So Megatron was almost in twice as many episodes as Galvatron. And if you think about this also, during the formative years while we were watching this, Galvatron started showing up on Saturdays. What was going on Monday through Friday? We watched reruns in syndication with Megatron. So Megatron was getting emphasized 5 days a week, Galvatron 1 day a week. Even when Galvatron made it in and his episodes made it into syndication, Galvatron still had 75% of the episodes being aired. Ergo, Megatron got so much more love in the media. He is more iconic and therefore less of a risk if you're picking a figure to make. So what does the future look like for these two characters? Well, first of all, I'm going to go out on a limb and I'm going to say that I truly believe Takara is working on a Galvatron. It only makes sense. It fits their profile for what they do and what they make. And what they make are the most iconic, the most popular, the sure thing hits. The figures that they put out are the figures that they know the fans want, but they know the fans will pay for. So they're not going to waste their time with a bunch of figures that aren't going to sell. They're going to go after figures such as Galvatron. Now, they've already done the Megatron. I think that a Megatron 3.0 is quite a ways out, even for Takara. They're not going to recycle that so quick. I would still love to see X-Transbots do something, or another company step up and show us what they can do. Options are always good, but then you could possibly flood the market, and I really do think that these third-party companies think about that. They have already flooded the market with a few other characters, such as Springer and a couple of them, so they're mindful of it, but would be nice to have a little bit more competition with Galvatron. Now, I've said it before, and I'll say it again. I really think Fans Toys has something up their sleeve for a Megatron. But it will be one of the last figures that they ever make, in my opinion. And my opinion was formed by a lot of really intelligent people selling me on that idea. It would really make a lot of sense. It would be one of their swan songs, followed by, of course, the granddaddy of all, Optimus Prime. But let me know what you think about this topic. Which character is more beloved to you? What do you think of the options that are out there? Do you think we need a whole lot more? Are you satisfied with what we've got? Let me know in the comments below. Like, subscribe, and Titanium Hanger out.